Ronnie Gelfont, 21st Century Public Adjusters, here today for another podcast. What's the difference between flood insurance and standard insurance policies? Big difference. The number one difference is flood insurance covers flood damages. Her homeowner policy covers everything but what we call flood damage and limited areas of backup. So what you have to remember is when looking for flood insurance, you engage with flood insurance through a secondary flood carrier, and it would be separate from your actual homeowner's policy. The biggest misconception is water damage needs to be a covered peril under your policy. So what does that mean? Perils are obviously what we have as coverage in insurance. So what this means is if it's a broken pipe and you happen to have the policy that has pipes included, that water damage would be covered. If it's rainwater, that would not be covered because that would be considered more of what we call groundwater, and groundwater is never covered under a basic homeowner policy. Going back to your homeowner's policy, those policies cover more like theft, damage from toilet overflow, wind damage, possible tree fell on your property. These are variations of how insurance is covered under a basic policy, where the water damages, unless it's from a hurricane, from a hailstorm, from a specific wind type damage, all other water-related damages are considered groundwater, considered flood water, considered non-covered water. So therefore, there's a difference in understanding the variations in water coverage. You have to know what the water source was to know if you do or don't have coverage. How should homeowners prepare for heavy rain and or flooding events? I guess the biggest thing to know is when you know rain's coming, or we know we're gonna have a week's worth of rain, biggest thing you should do is clean all your gutters. You want to ensure that you have no obstructions in the downspouts to where the water's releasing out from. And is it releasing out far enough away from the foundation of the property where you're able to move the water that's concentrated on the top of the house through your gutter system and then far away from the property as it stands? That is the biggest piece of trying to protect the property. The other pieces are, outside of your home. Are you doing specific things to make sure that water is running away from the home and not to the home? And then interior, if you have a basement, you should know that your basement should have a sump pump or some type of water filtration system that will move water that comes into the basement back out. And that usually is a sump pump, or there are newer systems that they're able to put together outside your home that will enable water to fall into a pipe and then again move the pipe left and right. So you're again moving water away from the property line. Oh, I mean, when you do have your basement, okay, or even a property that has no basement or crawl space, any valuables in your home should be lifted up off the ground. Flood insurance, not that it matters, but flood insurance in general is your knee down. So if anything is valuable below your knee, I would have it above your knee, somewhere more secure to protect it from any water sources. Also, in your basement, when you do check and ensure that your sump pumps are working and moving water out, you should also take a look at all the concrete. If it's visible, make sure that the concrete, if it has any visible cracks, that you're sealing those cracks. You're doing everything you can to prevent further damages or allowing damage from water to enter into your sealed basement. So in the event that you know that a giant storm is coming, or you're going to have days of water events, there are many things, like I just mentioned here, you can kind of do to prepare yourself to make it through that event. I find there are so many things that you can do that you need to really just kind of focus on the family, the property. Family comes first, property comes second. But if you try to do the basic things I mentioned in the beginning, where you're moving water away from the property, you will usually put yourself in a safer position so you don't have to worry about these events when they do take place, that you've already safeguarded yourself, you have a plan in place, you have a location to go to, you have a safety kit prepared, and you already have been doing preventative actions before you heard this event. And if you didn't do those preventative actions, do those things we discussed so everything puts you in a more healthy position to withstand the storm. Are basement floods typically covered by insurance in New Jersey and Pennsylvania? Good question. I mean, within New Jersey, Pennsylvania laws are very similar when it comes to this. Um, Flood insurance, you typically need to have flood insurance to have flood insurance. So flood insurance only covers NEDAP. So what we really need to understand is outside of your homeowner's uh, policy, you would engage in a flood policy, both PA and New Jersey. It's usually a separate company, and it gives you, again, that coverage for what we call need down. When you have other perils, which perils would be the lightning storm, windstorm, hailstorm, tree fall, those are all covered under your basic policy, homeowner's policy, to ensure that you have coverages for the home itself. Those do not relate usually to flooding water, groundwater, backup water, some pump failures. Trying to think of all different types of things that take place. I mean, there's so many things. When you have coverage in your home from water, it's usually from a burst pipe. It's usually from some type of backup system in your home. You could have had a dishwasher fail. You could have had your air conditioning system not releasing outside the house, backing up in the home. Washing machine failed, started running water to your home. Toilet overflows. All these things are covered under your, broad-based policy. However, rain is never covered under any policy except for a flood policy. Because flood policies are the idea of a creek overfilling, rainwater overfilling the ground and coming into your home, any type of unrelated pipe in your home, because pipes are related only to property damage outside the home. If it's not a storm of a windstorm itself or hurricane storm or hailstorm, rain without the wind is not covered. Groundwater is not covered. Or I say not, typically not, because of course you can buy policies that will cover these things. They're all covered under flood policies. So always look into flood policies to ensure you have full coverage for water damages. What's the process for appealing denied flood insurance claims? Okay. Well, denied means there's specific language that the insurance carrier is outlining to what they're seeing or stating that's not allowing you to have coverage. That's the biggest piece that you need to understand in that letter from the insurance company telling you this is why you're denied, okay? Now, if there's a disagreement with the specifics of what they're stating to you, then it's your job to go back to the policy, areas of what specifically you believe should have been covered that they've outlined wrong. Take pictures, grab your documentation, make sure that you fulfill everything that can make your case. You bring those details back to the insurance carrier, basically showing them an area that they missed. Maybe it wasn't clear. Now you provide the clarity that they need. This should usually bring you to a position to reopen the denial, allow them to see the specifics that you're bringing forward. If this fails, or you're not able to overcome the objection that they're putting in front of you, you need to then get legal attention, legal advice, because only a lawyer at this point would be able to bring forth this disagreement that you're bringing forward under more of a legal standpoint rather than you trying to verb it to them with your understanding. That is the easiest way of trying to handle a denial and what you would do specifically. And then most importantly, if you fail, you still have an option by utilizing lawyers that work within the insurance field. The way I relate to all these processes are we usually minimize these things because we are licensed, so therefore we know what should have been accepted or not. I don't usually receive anything as far as a denial when I submit a claim in. Most of the claims I submit in, if they are denied at all, are partially denied, and those are usually expected based upon the type of policy. Maybe they're denying a portion of the roof, but they're paying for all the interior damage. But to have a denial means you approach the actual claim incorrectly, you did not provide the proper pictures, photographs, and documentations up front to enable them to see the claim as you see it, to then have a claim in front of the insurance carrier that they're willing to provide, all the fixes that will make things right for you. I said the easiest thing right now, I always try to tell people, is get professional help before you actually engage with insurance, because you usually only have one shot at it. And once you start going at the insurance company with misinformation, you're usually backtracking, trying to fill in blanks that they've already made a decision on, and you're probably going to be stuck having to get legal help rather than having the professional help up front of a public adjuster like 21st Century Public Adjusters. For myself, Ron Gelfont. Does flood insurance cover mold growth from water damage? It's a good question. Typically, no. And the answer that we say typically no is mold takes a few days to grow. So I'll give you a scenario where the mold would be covered in that scenario. You are away for a week to 10 days. In the second day of being away, you have a pipe burst in your home, water's running in your house. For 10 days, it's just running. The areas that are soaking wet, we'll assume on the first floor, are all wet from, we'll call it the ankle down, and then everything on the lower floor, basement, is completely soaked, ceiling all the way down. In this particular situation, what you have to realize is mold's going to grow on the upstairs floor in areas where the water wicked up to. So all areas that were wicked up to the water event are going to start having mold. So now as you find the water, shut the water off 10 days later, as you look around that day, you're going to see mold. That mold, because it is going to be covered, because it's covered under a peril that was covered because, again, you didn't have a sudden accidental damage that you knew and ignored. You had it happen when you weren't there. So that allowed mold to generate, mold to grow, and for you to also have a problem that you were unknown to know about until you came back to your home 10 days later. So the claim would be covered. You would be put, in a position where you got to resolve all the damages, while you have to, what's the best word here? Mediate or mitigate as much as you can, bring the insurance company in so they're able to see all the damages, and then they can work with you on repairing what needs to be repaired. What are the time limits for appealing a denied claim? Normally we say 60 days. Every policy is a little bit different. There are different caveats, some with giving you 90 days, 120 days. I've even seen 180 days. I've even seen 45 days. But in a general sense, they stick at 60 days, giving you that option when there's a disagreement to put your best effort forward for you to overcome the disagreement. It's always important to check the terms of your policy, check all the various, variations of timelines that each policy sets forth for your, appeal to whatever it is that they're telling you that they're not paying for. Can homeowners, pursue legal action if they go through the appeals process and the appeals process continues the denial? Yes, legal action is always an option. So let's understand the process of insurance. When you engage with an insurance carrier, if you're not Clear with your policy coverages, engage with a adjuster, someone like myself who can advocate for you or even speak with you beforehand if you don't hire them to ensure that you got their best advice and information to move forward. If you do go forward on your own, what you need to know is you have the right to share all of your notes, documents, pictures with the insurance carrier. So if they come at you and they came forward and said that this is the reason why we want you to go through our appeals process, the appeals process is an internal process where they're basically denying you, but they're also giving you an option. Maybe they missed something. So you bring your best foot forward, you bring all that information to the insurance carrier, and here's what's going to happen. If they look over your documentation and pictures and you're able to overcome that, they reopen the claim. If you're not able to get that reevaluated in your favor, then your option is always to get legal advice. And that's where we would always recommend one of our lawyers to you for you to go forward with and be able to put your best foot forward so the insurance carrier understands the legality of where they made their mistake. Because insurance usually tries to use policy over law, and that's the part most people don't understand, and the lawyers know that, I know that, and that's kind of how we utilize our processes in trying to ensure that you're giving documentation and pictures always, and giving your information, and if that fails, to ensure that you get the legal advice or professional advice from someone like myself or a legal team. If you go through the appeals process properly within their timeline, you have up to 1 year. At this point, you have a year from the appeals process because the appeals process is dated, and then you always have a year's worth of time to put legal action forward. If you didn't go through an appeals process, it would be a year from the denial. What evidence strengthens an appeal for a denied claim? Goes back to the number two basic things: documentation, dates, timeline. You're basically providing a story. So you have to have a timeline of your story, where the story begins, where the actions are, what you did within the story to prevent further damages, and then of course, where you stand at that point because you have damages that need to be rectified. Pictures are your best documentation. Documentation, when we say documentation, everybody thinks paperwork and things like that. My best documentation is pictures. Before and after pictures, your pictures even before, meaning before the event took place, that picture, the event picture, and then of course, once you're fixing everything, you want to be back to picture perfect, which is that original picture. And that's kind of what you're looking for insurance companies to do, is to help put everything back together financially that was taken away from you through the event. Within the appeals process, you're appealing with the knowledge of what was provided up front. So if your documentation and pictures aren't enough for what is needed in this scenario, you may need to get your own experts, and experts that we would use within our own office. We have engineers, we have other professionals that are within mitigation and restoration areas that have licenses that can give specific guidelines of what was missed, what they would have done different. And then of course, on an engineering side, every little detail that you can possibly imagine on where things started and where things are, and then all the missing pieces that they believe need to be done that were not foreseen from the original adjuster that went out and looked at things. So all this is important when combating and trying to come back to the insurance carrier through the appeals process, and or all the same information again if you had to go through the legal process. It's just depending upon if they listen to you or if they're going to listen to a lawyer. How can homeowners avoid underinsurance issues that lead to claim denials? Normally, when you have underinsurance, that means you're not paying attention to your policy. So policy reviews every year prevents these things from happening. If you review your policy, review your situation, when I say review your situation, maybe you had an unfinished basement that this past year you finished the basement. That changes your situation at home if you don't tell the insurance carrier, hey, we don't have a concrete basement anymore. We now have a living space in our basement. You want to tell the insurance company this because now the evaluation of your home is still the same, but maybe you only had, as we spoke in some other clips in the past, we've spoken about flood insurance and different types of insurance. Same thing you have to understand with this is if you have basic insurance in a concrete basement, you may only need 5 or 10,000 of backup. Now that your basement is a full living area, you probably need closer to 5 or 10% of the value of your home to have full coverage for that basement need if you were to have a backup problem. So underinsurance usually just means that when they evaluate your home, and the home evaluation is $1 million, and meanwhile you've had your home insured for $800,000, they're only going to be paying you up to $800,000, regardless of it being worth $1 million. This happens normally on what we call commercial properties, because on a commercial property, normally I own the property in a commercial scenario, so I may only choose to insure it for up to 80% because I have the available dollars to make up the difference. This helps me by not having to pay so much in insurance, and that's usually the only time that we see it within our scope, unless people ignore their policies like we mentioned, and you're not reviewing your specific needs, and in reviewing the specifics with your insurance carrier for them to offer you or tell you other things that are available to you. Outside of your basic, your broad, and your special type policies, there are a handful of other endorsements that are always welcomed into any of these other types of policies that can give you a more robust type policy. So I always say review it yearly. Look for variations to areas that you might not have or you have limited coverages for to see, are your limits in the limited areas enough? Maybe they need to be increased slightly. And those are usually the best things to kind of look for to ensure you're not stuck in a position of being under-evaluated or underinsured for your property. And most importantly, being denied or even having a claim that goes through and having an under-evaluation coming forward. My recommendation with every homeowner I meet with, the first thing I do is I actually go over their policy with them. I kind of tell them, regardless of what we're here for today, tree fell down, whatever it is, I go through the whole policy so they understand where the limits are, what endorsements are there, how it does relate to the situation today. And because of this situation being what it is, these other pieces in here that we're touching base with, let me write in here what you need to add in. So when you have that conversation with your agent, you can ask them why you don't have these things or why your limits are lower. And believe it or not, if you have coverage for something and the coverage is, we'll say limited to 10,000 and you want 40,000, you're probably looking at about $40 to $50 difference in the premium to add that amount in to give you that more robust type of policy coverage. I do it with everybody. I'm confused usually how an agent sells policy and then doesn't ask certain questions about the property that they're insuring to better understand what other pieces could be useful to that homeowner. I appreciate you listening today, learning more about variations between homeowner policies, flood policies, and understanding the variations of denials and when to use a lawyer. If you like what you saw today, please subscribe, like below, or just follow me, Ronnie Gelfont, 21st Century Public Adjusters. I can be reached at 215-485-3107. And 21st Century Public Adjusters is located in Newtown, Pennsylvania.